Hey everyone, welcome back. So today we're diving into the world of remote work, specifically how to land your dream remote gig.
Always a hot topic.
Right. Everyone wants that flexibility and freedom, but it can be crazy competitive out there.
No kidding, it's like a whole different ballgame.
So to help us navigate this wild west of remote work, we're turning to Shane Hummus,
The YouTube entrepreneur.
the one and only. He claims to have helped tons of people land remote jobs.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's his secret sauce?
Well, he put out this video where he breaks down 15 in-demand skills for remote work. 15, I don't know about you, but my brain kind of short-circuited trying to process all that.
Yeah, 15 is a lot to juggle. It's like, where do you even begin?
Exactly. So to make sense of it all, I've grouped Shane's 15 skills into a few key categories. First up, we've got the power of influence and persuasion.
Okay, sounds intriguing. Does that mean what I think it means?
You bet it does. Shane kicks things off with sales.
Yeah.
Yep. Good old-fashioned sales. He actually says that everyone should try sales at least once in their career.
Really? Even if you're not in a traditionally salesy field?
That's what he says. He argues that sales skills are essential for any career, but even more so in the remote world.
I can kind of see that. When you're remote, you really have to be able to sell yourself, your ideas, your value.
Exactly. And get this, Shane backs up his claim with some stats from a site called Dynamite Jobs. Over 11% of their remote job listings are sales related.
Wow, that's huge.
Tell me about it. So if you're looking to break into the remote work scene, brushing up on those sales skills is definitely a smart move.
Noted. So what other persuasive powers does Shane recommend we tap into?
Well, he also talks about personal branding. He actually compares it to Elon Musk having more Twitter followers than Tesla.
Okay, that's an interesting comparison. I'm not sure I'd want to model my online presence after Elon Musk.
Right, he's definitely a unique case. But I think Shane's point is that in today's digital world, building a strong personal brand is crucial.
It's like you're not just selling a product or service, you're selling yourself.
Exactly. You are the product, especially in the remote world. Okay, ready for the next skill cluster? This one is near and dear to my entrepreneurial heart.
Hit me with it. I'm ready to be persuaded.
All right, so Shane argues that content creation is the #1 opportunity to start your own business.
Interesting. I can definitely see how that ties into the whole remote work thing.
Right. And he goes so far as to say that it's even easier than traditional entrepreneurship,
Right.
which I don't know if I completely agree with.
Yeah, easier might be a bit of a stretch. Like, sure, the barriers to entry are lower. You don't need a brick and mortar store or anything, but it still takes a ton of work to build a successful content creation business.
Totally. Don't let those perfectly curated Instagram feeds fool you. There's a lot of hustle behind the scenes.
For sure. You need a solid strategy, you need to be consistent, and you definitely need to be comfortable putting yourself out there.
And you need to be okay with constantly learning and adapting, because the digital landscape is always changing.
Seriously, it's like the Wild West out there. But
Right.
I guess that's part of the excitement, right?
Exactly. But speaking of excitement, Shane seems particularly gung-ho about YouTube. He actually claims it's where the big money is.
Doesn't he make like 6 figures a month from his YouTube channel?
Something like that, which, good for him. But it does make you wonder, is it really all sunshine and rainbows on YouTube? Or is he just really good at selling the dream?
Right, like I'm sure there are tons of challenges that come with building a successful YouTube channel.
Oh, absolutely. And I bet it's way more work than it looks. But it is interesting to think about the different ways you can monetize content these days.
Totally. It's not just about ad revenue anymore.
Speaking of which, Shane's next skill cluster is all about digital mastery. He basically says if you're good at this stuff, you'll never struggle to find a job, remote or otherwise.
Okay, now that's a bold claim. I'm listening.
So he lumps digital marketing, email marketing, and even the dreaded cold email under this umbrella.
Cold email, my least favorite.
I know, right? It could feel so spammy. But Shane actually tells this crazy story about Coinbase's first employee. Apparently, they got the job by cold emailing the founders back in 2013.
No way.
And get this, they got paid in Bitcoin.
Talk about being in the right place at the right time. I mean, that's got to be like winning the lottery.
Right. Although I'm not sure I'd recommend sending out a bunch of random cold emails in hopes of striking digital gold.
Yeah, I wouldn't bank on that strategy.
But it does go to show that sometimes taking a chance and putting yourself out there can pay off big time.
True. And I guess in today's job market, it's all about standing out from the crowd.
Exactly. Okay, ready for a bit of a shift? We're moving from the digital realm to to the land of people skills.
People skills. I thought we were talking about remote work.
We are. But Shane makes a really good point. Even if you're working from your couch in your pajamas, you still got to know how to deal with people effectively.
That's so true. It's easy to forget that remote work is still, well, work. You're still part of a team, you still have to communicate effectively, and you still need to build relationships, even if it is through a screen.
Exactly. And that's why he emphasizes the importance of things like communication, management, and even just basic social skills.
It's like just because you're not physically in the same room doesn't mean you can slack off on those soft skills. Actually, I'd argue they're even more important in a remote setting.
Totally. Because when you're not face-to-face, it's easy for misunderstandings to happen or for things to get lost in translation.
For sure. And building trust is so important when you're working remotely.
Speaking of trust, remember that book Shane mentioned? How to Win Friends and Influence People?
Oh yeah, the classic. I actually haven't read it in years. Is it still relevant?
Shane swears by it. He says it's the #1 book he's ever read.
Huh. Maybe I should give it a reread. So what's so great about it?
Well, it's all about building genuine relationships, showing appreciation for others, and finding common ground things that are important, whether you're connecting in person or online.
Okay, that actually does sound pretty relevant to the remote work world.
Right. It's like building your remote work empathy muscles.
I like that. I'm going to start using that. So we've covered persuasion, content creation, digital marketing, and now people skills. What other hidden talents do we need to unleash for remote work domination?
Well, buckle up because this next one is a biggie. Tech skills. Shane's take is pretty straightforward. You need them if you want to play in the big leagues of remote work.
Makes sense. I mean, so much of remote work relies on technology.
Exactly. And he's not just talking about knowing how to use Zoom or send an email. We're talking coding, data analytics, cybersecurity, those high-paying, in-demand skills.
The kind of skills that make you say, maybe I should have paid more attention in computer science class.
Right. But the good news is it's never too late to learn. There are tons of online resources and boot camps where you can upskill and boost your tech IQ.
True. You don't necessarily need a fancy degree to break into tech these days.
Exactly. Although Shane does make a good point. He says that while you don't always need a college degree, you do need to know your stuff now more than ever.
Yeah, the competition is fierce out there. So how do you stand out from the crowd if you don't have that traditional piece of paper?
Well, that's where building a killer portfolio comes in.
A portfolio? Like, what kind of portfolio are we talking about here?
Think of it as your remote work resume on steroids. It's about showcasing your projects, highlighting your accomplishments, and basically proving to potential employers that you can walk the walk.
I like it. It's about showing, not just telling.
Exactly.
Oh.
And don't be afraid to toot your own horn a little.
Okay, so you've got your tech skills down, you're building a killer portfolio.
Yeah.
What else is on Shane's remote work checklist?
Well, this next one threw me for a loop at first. He spends a good chunk of time talking about AI prompting.
AI prompting, like talking to robots. Is this a sci-fi movie?
Not quite, but it is pretty futuristic. Basically, it's about mastering the art of communicating with AI tools like ChatGPT.
Okay, I'm listening.
So instead of just typing in random questions, you're crafting these really specific prompts to get the AI to do your bidding, whether it's writing code, generating content, or even just coming up with creative ideas.
So it's like having a super smart intern that you can boss around.
Pretty much. Except this intern can process information and generate responses way faster than any human ever could.
That's kind of scary, but also kind of cool.
Right. It's both. And Shane actually mentions that AI prompt engineers can make up to $375,000 a year.
Okay, now you're talking my language. So how do I become an AI whisperer?
Well, Shane says it all comes down to the quality of your prompts. He uses this phrase, garbage in, garbage out. Basically, if you put in crappy prompts, you're going to get crappy results. But if you take the time to learn how to craft clear, specific, and well-structured prompts, you can unlock the true potential of AI.
Makes sense. It's like anything else, you get out what you put in. But it is interesting to think about how these new technologies are shaping the future of work.
Totally. And it makes you realize that even in a world dominated by technology, human skills like critical thinking, problem solving, and creativity are still incredibly valuable.
Absolutely. Robots might be able to automate certain tasks, but they can't replace human ingenuity. So what's next on Shane's remote work hit list?
Well, this next one kind of surprised me at first because I thought it was a given. He spends a good chunk of time talking about project management.
Project management. I mean, that seems pretty obvious, right? Like, of course, you need to be organized and meet deadlines when you're working remotely.
Right. But I think what Shane is getting at is that project management in the remote world is a whole different beast.
Oh, I see where you're going with this. It's not just about managing tasks. It's about managing people, expectations, and communication across different time zones and cultural contexts.
Exactly. It's like being a conductor of an orchestra, except your musicians are all working remotely from their own homes.
That's a great analogy. And just like a conductor needs to make sure all the instruments are in sync, a remote project manager needs to ensure that everyone is on the same page, communication is flowing, and tasks are being completed efficiently and effectively.
Exactly. And that's where those project management tools that Chip mentioned earlier, things like Monday.com and Asana, can really come in handy. They provide that centralized hub for communication, task management, and progress tracking.
It's all about transparency and accountability, right?
Yeah.
Making sure everyone is on the same page, even when you're not physically in the same room.
Exactly. And speaking of being on the same page, communication is key, especially in a remote setting. And that brings us to our final, but certainly not least important, skill cluster: social skills and networking.
Social skills and networking. You're going to tell me that even though I'm working remotely, I can't just hide behind my computer screen all day?
Afraid not. As much as we might like to, we can't escape the human element of work entirely, even in the digital age.
Fine, but how am I supposed to network when I'm working remotely? Do I just start sliding into people's LinkedIn DMs?
Well, you could, but there's a bit more to it than that. Shane actually recommends one of my all-time favorite books, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Oh yeah, the classic. I actually haven't read it in years.
It's a must-read for a reason, and it's surprisingly relevant to the remote work world.
Okay, you've piqued my interest. What's so great about it?
Well, it's all about building genuine connections, showing appreciation for others, and finding common ground things that are important, whether you're connecting in person or online.
That makes sense. It's about building relationships no matter the medium.
Exactly. And Shane argues that in a remote setting, building those relationships is more important than ever.
I can see that. It's easy to feel isolated when you're working remotely, so having those connections, even if they're virtual, can make a world of difference.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Sales, content creation, digital marketing, people skills, tech skills, AI prompting, project management. I'm exhausted just thinking about it.
Tell me about it. It's like Shane took us on a whirlwind tour of the remote work landscape.
But before we take a well-deserved break, I want to touch on one more crucial aspect of landing your dream remote job.
Lay it on me. What's the secret sauce?
The secret sauce is, there is no secret sauce. But there are definitely some things you can do to stand out from the crowd of other remote job seekers.
And we were just getting to the good stuff.
Oh, right.
Standing out from the crowd.
Which, let's be real, can feel impossible sometimes.
You're telling me. It's like everyone and their dog is trying to land a remote gig these days.
Seriously.
Yep.
So how do you make your application rise to the top of the virtual pile?
Well, step one is nailing those application essentials. Your resume and cover letter.
Ugh, those two documents that everyone dreads writing, but they're still so important.
Tell me about it. I swear, I've spent hours agonizing over a single bullet point on my resume. But it's true what they say. You never get a second chance to make a first impression.
So true. And in the remote world where you're often competing with a global pool of candidates, that first impression is everything.
Absolutely. So how do we make sure our resumes and cover letters are saying all the right things?
Well, for starters, ditch the generic one-size-fits-all approach. Shane really emphasizes the importance of tailoring your application to each specific job you apply for.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do you tailor your resume when you're applying for like a million different jobs?
It's all about highlighting the skills and experiences that are most relevant to the specific role and company you're targeting. So for example, let's say you're applying for a remote content writing position at a tech startup.
Okay, I'm following.
Instead of just listing content writing as a skill, you might say something like experienced in crafting engaging and informative blog posts, website copy, and social media content for a tech-savvy audience.
Oh, I see. It's about painting a picture with your words and showing them that you understand their specific needs and target market.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to use keywords from the job description. It'll help your application get past those pesky applicant tracking systems.
Good to know. Those things can be brutal.
They can be. But remember, it's not just about keywords. You want your personality to shine through too.
Right, because at the end of the day, they're not just hiring a set of skills, they're hiring a person.
Exactly. Okay, so let's say you've wowed them with your resume and cover letter, and you've landed yourself an interview.
The virtual interview. Cue the nervous sweats.
Don't worry, we've got you covered. We actually talked about acing those virtual meetings in a previous episode, remember?
But right, something about making sure your tech is working and wearing pants.
Exactly. It's amazing how quickly those little details can make or break an interview.
For sure, especially when you're trying to make a good impression through a screen. It's like you want to come across as professional and polished, but also not like you're trying too hard. It's a delicate balance.
It really is. And it's totally normal to feel a little awkward or uncomfortable at first. But just remember, the interviewer is human too. They've probably been on their fair share of awkward Zoom calls.
That's a good point. Maybe I should start picturing them in their pajamas to calm my nerves.
Hey, whatever works. But seriously, the key is to relax, be yourself, and let your personality shine through.
Easier said than done, but I'm trying. So any other hot tips for acing those virtual interviews?
Well, Shane actually gave a really interesting piece of advice. He said, to use the virtual format to your advantage.
Use it to our advantage. How do we do that?
Well, since you're not in a sterile office environment, you have a bit more freedom to showcase your personality and create a more engaging experience for the interviewer.
Okay, I like where you're going with this. Give me an example.
So let's say you're passionate about travel and you've worked remotely from different locations. You could mention how that experience has shaped your work ethic or broadened your perspective.
Oh, I see. It's about finding those little human connection points, even in a digital space.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of a well-placed book in the background or a cool piece of art on the wall. It can be a great conversation starter.
True. It's all about creating a welcoming and memorable experience for the interviewer. But what about those tricky interview questions? You know, the ones that make you freeze up and forget how to speak English.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. Like, tell me about a time you failed.
Ugh, the worst.
The key is to be prepared. Think about your experiences, both successes and failures, and how they relate to the skills and qualities that the company is looking for.
So it's like, tell me about a time you failed, but make it sound impressive.
Exactly. It's all about framing your experiences in a positive light and showcasing what you learned from them. And don't forget to ask thoughtful questions at the end of the interview. It shows that you're engaged, curious, and genuinely interested in the role.
It also gives you a chance to interview them, right? Make sure it's the right fit for you too.
Exactly. It's a two-way street. Okay, so you've aced the interview, you're feeling good. What's next?
The waiting game. I hate the waiting game.
I hear you. It's the worst part. But don't just sit around refreshing your inbox every 5 seconds.
What should we be doing instead?
This is the perfect time to follow up with a thank you note. It's a small gesture, but it can go a long way in showing the interviewer that you're truly interested in the opportunity.
Okay, that makes sense. And what's the best way to send a thank you note these days? Email, handwritten note, carrier pigeon.
Email is usually best for speed and convenience, but a handwritten note can definitely make you stand out from the crowd. It just depends on the company culture and the overall vibe you're getting from the interviewer.
Okay, got it. So let's say, hypothetically speaking, that we followed all of Shane's advice, we've rocked the application process, aced the interview, and, drumroll, please, we've landed our dream remote job.
Congratulations, you did it.
But now what? What happens after you pop the champagne and do a victory dance around your living room?
That's a great question, and one that we'll be diving into right after the break. Stay tuned. And we're back, talking all things remote work.
Picking up right where we left off. You've landed the job, congrats. Now what?
Right. You've wowed them with your skills, your charm, your virtual background. Now it's time to wow them with your actual work.
No pressure, right?
None at all. But seriously, transitioning into a new remote role can come with its own unique set of challenges and triumphs.
Okay, I'm listening. What kind of challenges are we talking about here?
Well, for starters, there's the whole work-life balance thing. It's this mythical creature that everyone talks about.
Yeah.
But it can be especially elusive when your office is also your living room.
Ugh, tell me about it. It's like, when does the workday end and when does my personal life begin? Sometimes it feels like the lines get blurred.
Exactly. And it's so easy to get sucked into the black hole of work when you're always just a few steps away from your computer.
So true. Suddenly it's 8 p.m. and you haven't moved up from your desk all day. Not exactly a recipe for a healthy work-life balance.
Definitely not. So what's the solution? How do we slay the remote work-life balance dragon?
Well, it starts with setting boundaries, both for yourself and for your clients or colleagues.
Boundaries? Like what kind of boundaries are we talking about here?
Well, for starters, establish clear working hours and stick to them as much as possible.
Okay, that makes sense. Treat it like a real job, even if it doesn't feel like one sometimes.
Exactly. And just as importantly, set boundaries with communication. Just because you're working remotely doesn't mean you're available 24/7.
Oh, that's a good one. It's so easy to get caught up in the expectation of instant responses, especially when you're working across different time zones.
Right. It's like just because I checked my email at 10 p.m. doesn't mean I'm going to respond right away.
Exactly. It's all about setting those expectations early on and sticking to your boundaries. But what about the whole social aspect of work? I mean, one of the biggest challenges of remote work is the potential for loneliness and isolation, right?
It's true. It can be tough to feel connected when you're working from home all the time. You miss those water cooler conversations, those impromptu coffee breaks, those random encounters that can spark creativity and collaboration.
Exactly. So how do we combat the remote work blues? How do we stay connected and build relationships when we're not physically together?
Well, it takes a conscious effort, but it's definitely doable. Remember all those networking tips we talked about earlier?
Oh, you mean like joining online communities, attending virtual events, basically putting ourselves out there digitally?
Exactly. Those things become even more important when you're working remotely.
It's like you have to be more intentional about building those connections.
Right. And don't underestimate the power of a simple video call. Just seeing someone's face and hearing their voice can make a world of difference.
So true. It's amazing how much a quick video chat can boost your mood and make you feel more connected. Okay, so we've talked about setting boundaries, staying connected. Any other pearls of wisdom for navigating the wild world of remote work?
Well, one thing that I've learned the hard way is the importance of creating a dedicated workspace.
Okay, tell me more about that. I've definitely been guilty of working from my couch a little too often.
It's so tempting, right? But trust me, having a dedicated workspace, even if it's just a corner of your bedroom, can make a huge difference in your productivity and your overall well-being.
It's about creating that mental separation between work life and home life.
Exactly. It's like when I'm in my workspace, I'm in work mode, but when I'm done for the day, I can close the door or at least put away my laptop and transition back into relaxation mode.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. It's all about setting those boundaries, right?
Boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. It's the key to a happy and successful remote work life. And speaking of success, what's your #1 piece of advice for someone who's just starting out on their remote work journey?
That's easy. Be patient, be persistent, and most importantly, be yourself. The remote work world can feel overwhelming at times, but it's also incredibly rewarding. You get to set your own hours, work from anywhere, and create a career that aligns with your passions and values. What's not to love?
I'm ready to sign up. This all sounds amazing.
Right. It's been an absolute pleasure diving deep into the world of remote work with you today.
Likewise.
And to all of you listening out there, we hope you've gleaned some valuable insights and inspiration from our conversation. Remember, the future of work is flexible, it's remote, and it's full of possibilities. Until next time, happy working.